Hi everybody, this is Craig Tina for the Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was created by Cyan, who's an advanced photographer from Virginia. Metadata, Nikon D50, 55 to 200 zoom lens at 82 millimeters, exposure trio, ISO 200, f22 and 1/30th of a second. I want to talk more about the f-stop in just a second. In her backstory, Cyan says she went out early one heavy foggy morning to photograph the fog. She said she was returning home, she turned around and saw all of her footprints meandering around in the field. She said it was like seeing the present become the past. Said I wanted to mention the metadata here in the f-stop. f22 is probably not the smallest, very close to the smallest aperture on this lens. And when we stop way down to the smallest apertures, we start to get something called diffraction, an overall loss of sharpness. So much of the time we talk about diffraction as something to avoid, but the interesting thing about this shot is it's an image of fog. So much of the time we go out to shoot scenics in the fog, we're drawn to the fog because of how the atmosphere of the fog mutes things and softens things. It creates a ghosting effect, especially on things that are far away from the camera. Diffraction, causing an overall loss of sharpness, could actually push the image more and more in that direction of sort of this ghost apparition, like ethereal feeling of things that are far away from the camera. And so much of the times we talk about things in a monolithic kind of way. This is a case where stopping all the way down and pushing towards diffraction might be a great creative choice, because it's just pushing the feeling of the scene in a direction where it has already gone because of the fog. I could even imagine doing a pinhole shot on this scene where we're shooting at a tiny aperture, just a hole, just a pinhole front plate of the camera, where we'd have an enormous amount of diffraction. It would really create sort of ghosted, ethereal feeling. So I just wanted to mention this idea of f22 and diffraction and how it might have helped the composition or the feeling that we're getting from the image here. I love Cyan's description of this idea of turning around and seeing the present become the past, all of a sudden seeing where she's been, just sitting there recorded, like a photograph, like a memoir in the field. Very powerful concept. And so much of what I love about this photograph really connects to that. There's a real strong sense of the passage of time, and also depth of time and depth of space in this image. Obviously the footprints do that in a real powerful way as they vanish in this shot that includes quite a bit of information from near to far. But it's not just that, it's also a sequencing of value and contrast. You have dark and moody in the foreground, and then it gets brighter and brighter to mediums, and then high mids, and all the way out to a near white in the background. That natural sequencing, going from dark to light, really helps to pull us from near to far. It's also a natural sequencing in some ways, in terms of the banding here from dark to light, how it starts off fairly contrasty and then it meters out and plays out, and the difference between light and dark becomes less and less until you get to here and you get to the tree. And that idea of sequencing, particularly when it's natural, so it's a sequence that feels natural to us because we're used to things moving on a continuum from bright to dark or dark to bright. Real powerful in addition to the footprints here. Another thing that I really enjoy about this composition is texture. So much of the time we have a shot like this where we have one subject that's representing generally one texture, then another subject represents another texture, and then another subject, sort of sky or just the fog itself, represents a third texture. In addition to these being different images or different subjects, the fact that they all represent different textures really helps to simplify the image and give it depth from the standpoint of space. And texture, when used in this way, can really help to create a feeling of ideas having their own space to live and breathe in. Really enjoy that about the composition. When it comes to a different variation of this image, or a perfect world change, the change that I'm going to make has to do with two basic things. First, it has to do with the idea that things at the top of the frame can have a lot more weight than things at the bottom of the frame, just because of the natural law of gravity. What goes up must come down, and when something that has a lot of mass, like this tree, is sitting on top of the composition, it takes on a lot more weight than it would down here. Down here there's not as much potential for it to fall. Up here there's quite a bit of potential because of gravity for us to imagine it falling over and coming all the way down to the bottom of the composition. The other concept that I wanted to talk about before I make the change that I'm going to make. This has to do with the idea of mystery, and in some respect also just balance. One of the main ideas, if not the main idea in this image, and this is the way Cyan described the image, which is part of the reason why I'm going to make the change I'm going to make. She really talks about the footprints being the main concept and how this is recording the passage of time. And for me, the tree becomes very, very heavy. I only need a little bit of that tree to have an anchor in the image, have a place to go to. The tree starts, and then we get up in here. We not only have the gravity of the tree coming down, the tree is such a powerful archetype. Even without it being in the top of the frame, tree as an idea has an enormous amount of physical mass and also psychological mass. Very powerful concept for us human beings. And then you add to that the fact that it moves up into this very bright area, so we start to get a lot of contrast. I would like to just suggest the tree and create a little bit of a feeling of mystery, and then the viewer can sort of complete the rest of the tree. And I personally like the image cropped a little bit down from the top because of those things that I'm mentioning. I think there are a whole lot of ways that we could crop from the top. I think we could start with a crop right in here somewhere where we just suggest a little bit of the tree. Here's before and here is after. And for me, when I don't see nearly as much at the top, I have a very, very different experience in terms of where I spend time in this image. Before, I spend a lot of time on the top part of that tree, and no matter where I go, I keep getting pulled there. And when I crop it a little bit, I actually spend more time going back and forth, and I think that that's Cyan's main idea in this image. It's this continuum of depth based on the passage of time. And I do think that you could play around with continuing to crop down. You know, we could just continue to crop this image down. So there's the before and there's the after. And for me, it's kind of interesting. The more I lose that sort of heaviness and mass and contrast, then two things are happening. There's more weight on the concept of moving out, and the footprints are going back in time, and the balance is different in the image. But there's also this idea of my imagination now being able to fill in the rest of the tree. And so I start to have an overlay of my own mind, things that are firing in my mind about this image, and that can be much, much, much more powerful for us as photographers to suggest some things and not complete them. That way we get to take advantage of the imagination of every viewer that sees a photograph. I think you could keep coming here. I think you could come all the way down to the point where you're just suggesting even the trunk of the tree, and I think that's also a fascinating image. The other thing this image makes me think about is a series of images. The footprints, to me, and the way they're metered out here, it's almost like some kind of a language. And I think you could have a lot of fun with shooting this one scene in different ways, composing it differently, or after shooting this to walk back out in the field and take more and more pictures and have this be a series of images where the field is sort of the same, but the configuration of the footprints are changing. I really think that somewhere right in here, one of the first crops would be my favorite take on it. Would love to hear your feedback on the changes that were made today in Cyan's beautiful image. Where Cyan started is absolutely fantastic, fantastic quality of light. I love her concept for the shot, love the simplicity, love the textures, love this feeling of exactly what she described, the present becoming the past. Really beautiful way to describe this image from a conceptual standpoint. I want to say a big thank you to Cyan, big thank you to you for being here. I hope to see you again very soon on the Daily Critique.